What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm e-bike builder. I do e-bike things. I build e-bikes. I know some things about e-bikes. Welcome to my channel. Like and subscribe. Today we're going to talk about the Lyric Graffiti X. So the Graffiti X, you can see it right here, right behind me. So it's a direct drive motor, 3,000 watt direct drive motor. It's got a 60 volt, 40 amp hour battery with Samsung 50E cells. So it's probably like 16S 8P or something. Then we've got, for the controller, we've got the ASI Back 2000 controller from ASI in Canada. Very powerful controller, can do about 2,000 watts continuous on 48 volts is what it's rated for, but it can do a lot more power peak, right? So here we are, Lyric Graffiti X. So I've been watching a lot of things on the Lyric Graffiti X. Let me fix my microphone slightly. Alright, I've been watching a lot of things on the Lyric Graffiti X. One of the channels that I like to watch is Mr. Central Driver. I'm sure you're all aware and familiar with Mr. Central Driver. He's a big e-bike YouTuber. He's one of the channels where he's got so many subscribers that he can pretty much say whatever he wants about these bikes. And they just keep sending him more. So, thanks Mr. Central Driver for all of your work on these videos. So he's got a number of videos. He's got the one where he kind of unboxes it in the garage. He's got the first 10 miles with the Lyric Graffiti X. He let his friend ride it. And then now more recently, a day ago, he's got a video where he's using the Kilowatt app to tune the ASI Back 2000 controller. Because a lot of people, so this is the whole topic of this video. A lot of people seem to believe that the Lyric Graffiti X accelerates a little bit slow off the line. Like, that's what people are saying, is it's like a $4,600 e-bike, and it's thousands of watts. You know, it's got a 3,000 watt motor, big battery. People are having problems with this bike accelerating slow, and they're like, what is going on? I don't understand it. Why is my $4,600 bike accelerating so slow? So let's go take a look at one of these videos just so I can show you what I'm talking about here. So let's go take a look at Mr. Central Driver. The video is called The First 10 Miles with the Lyric Graffiti X.
All right, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen?
And let's get some sound going.
Welcome back to another exciting video, and this one is actually going to be exciting because I got the Lyric Graffiti X. Finally, after ordering this thing in June, I'm going to go for my first ride on this thing. Other than when I went up and down the street really quick after I did.
All right, so here's Mr. Central Driver. So let's get to the part where he's kind of riding it. Let's see here.
Mention that. They said they were going to see what they can do, but maybe it was something about the battery perimeters on, saving.
Okay, here we go.
They need to be way up here. This is just way too low for.
So he says the handlebars are a little bit low. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I've seen some other people ride it and it seems okay. So maybe it's, I don't know. But so let's see the acceleration off the line here.
Regular riding. Another thing is, this is full throttle. 10 miles an hour, 15, all right. After about 15 miles an hour, then the bike starts picking up speed. I don't know why they didn't fix that issue. I mentioned that. They said they were going to see what they can do, but maybe it was something about issue. Then,
so so he paid $4,600 for this bike. It's a nice bike. I like it.
This is just way too low for regular riding. Cool. Another thing is, this is full throttle.
Look at that.
10 miles an hour,
a little bit slow.
15, all right. After about 15 miles an hour, then the bike starts picking up speed.
So the consensus seems to be, after about 15 miles an hour, then the bike kind of starts accelerating faster. So why might that be? Let's talk a little bit about why that might be. Okay, so I think my first guess would be the motor on this thing. Right, it's a direct drive hub motor. So there's a reason that a lot of e-bikes use geared hub motors. And that's because they just have great torque per amp, right, on the geared hub motors. So it's just a very efficient, like up to like 30 miles an hour, geared hub motors work great. You know, for e-bike speeds, like geared hub motors, there's a reason why basically every e-bike uses a geared hub motor. It's just like bang for buck. You know, so but this is a direct drive hub motor. And so what people do with direct drive motors, since they have less torque, you can just give the motor more amps, more current from your battery, and it kind of makes up for it, right? It makes up for it. So, like when you have a direct drive motor and you're just completely stopped, and you hit the throttle, make it going from a stop. When it's first starting out, that slow part, when it first starts out from a stop, if you give it full throttle, a direct drive hub motor is going to be, that's when it's going to be using the most amps, the most current. It's just like when it can't even move, right? When it's first getting started. So you kind of have to be careful with direct drive hub motors, is my understanding. Like you have to tune it. You kind of have to tune the controller in such a way where the motor and the battery are kind of jiving. Everything's jiving together, right? But so we've got a direct drive hub motor. You should be able to just give it a whole bunch of current, right? And you would think that with this Lyric Graffiti X, well, it's got the ASI back 2000, right? And I should be able to do like, 100 something amps. I should be able to do a lot with that controller. So it seems like I don't think that that's the problem, right? It seems like, it's got a 60 volt, 40 amp hour battery. We'll look into the battery a little bit more, but it's like, man, I've just been sitting here and I've been watching all these videos, and it's like some people seem to be pleased with the Graffiti X. Like I watch Oregon e-biker Mark is a channel on YouTube, and he's got the Graffiti X. He's been riding it around. It seemed a little bit slow to me, like taking off. Just in general, that's something that I've noticed. Is it accelerates kind of slow, but then once it gets going, this thing can be going like 50 miles an hour. And Mr. Central Driver, he also said that he compared the Graffiti X to the Motor Goat and those Goat power bikes that have direct drive hub motors. And it sounds, so this is what I'm thinking, is that, so Mr. Central Driver, he said that the Goat power bikes, they accelerate faster and they get up to speed faster. But he also said that the Lyric Graffiti X starts out slower and the Goat power bike just takes off. But then after a while, like once you get going a certain speed, the Graffiti X, he just said, whoosh, just flies away, right? And goes faster. So I think that the first reason why this Graffiti X is slow from a stop is because the motor itself, the copper windings in the motor, right? Like in these electric motors, you've got copper, and there's windings that go all the way around inside of the motor. And depending on how many turns of the copper is turned, while winding the motor, it kind of configures the motor for how many RPM the top speed is going to be, right? And how many RPM, like the motor, it's basically like how fast is the motor meant to be spinning? Like how fast do you want that thing to be going, right? So like when you're matching up your motor to your bike, you want a motor that can spin at like an RPM that is going to make your wheel move at a desirable speed for your bike, right? So what it seems like to me is with this Lyric Graffiti X, Lyric must have chose a motor that has a high speed winding, right? And it's just like inherent to the motor's characteristics is that it's just kind of going to start out a little bit slower, but then once it gets moving a little bit, there's going to have kind of a power band, and it'll feel a bit more powerful, a little bit more torquey. And I've heard people have that complaint about direct drive hub motors. I've read some people seem to prefer the torquier direct drive hub motors, because they can accelerate so much faster. They might not have as high of a top speed, but how fast do you really want to be going on your e-bike? I don't know. So yeah, I mean it just seems like the motor on this thing, it's probably a faster wind inside of the motor, and it's just kind of like inherent to its design, right? Like it's gonna accelerate a little bit slower. It should be smooth, but it's not gonna have as much torque on the low end. It'll accelerate slower, and then the hill climbing ability isn't gonna be that great. Like when you don't have any speed, when you're going less than like 15 miles an hour, hill climbing ability is not going to be great. And I think even once you get moving a little bit, like if you're going up a big enough hill, it's probably not the best winding for like hill climbing. Like if you live in San Francisco or San Diego or like some really hilly place, the Lyric Graffiti X probably isn't the bike for you. If this motor, this winding, the high speed wind on the motor, if that is the only option for the motor, this bike might not be for you, right? Because this thing, it's just made to go faster. Like it's not, and it as an e-bike, I think it does kind of put it at a little bit of a disadvantage because like bikes, when you think about riding a bike, there's a lot of like stop go stop go stop go stop go stop go. Like you're constantly accelerating and then just slamming on your brakes, and then accelerating and slamming on your brakes, accelerating and slowing down, right? So that's what bikes do. And unfortunately, like this bike with a higher speed, high speed winding on the motor, it's just not really made for like accelerating and going lower speeds, right? Like this bike wants to get going, right? And then once you get, it's like Bowser and Mario Kart, right? Like Bowser in Mario Kart, he was like really heavy and he accelerated really slow, but then once he got going, he had like a really high top speed. This thing's like Bowser in Mario Kart. That's how you gotta think about it. And so that was one of the first things that I noticed was Mr. Central Driver, like he really likes the bike. I like the bike. I think it looks awesome. I don't really like these moped style bikes, but I think this one looks pretty cool. It's got the motorcycle rims, like it looks pretty beefy, pretty chunky, you know? But a lot of people seem to be complaining about the low end. So let's go see. Let's go take a look at Mr. Central Driver's more recent video. Lyric Graffiti X, make it faster for free. So let's take a look at Mr. Central Driver on this video and see what he did here. Tuning the controller. I'm just going to turn this off because I don't know if that's copyrighted or what. Alright, so let's see what he's up to here.
How to modify the controller on the Lyric Graffiti X. This is a fantastic bike, but it does have one huge problem, and that is the fact that from 0 to 15 miles an hour, you really feel like you're holding up traffic if you stay in the street.
So that's kind of a big thing, guys, is like, if you're paying $4,600 for an e-bike, which is kind of more like a motorcycle, and you want to ride that thing in the streets, like if you don't have low end torque and acceleration, like it's just it's such a pain point. Like I think that would become so annoying if you have a bike that doesn't accelerate fast. So this thing, like it's not really meant for stop and go, Like it's not its strong point. It just wants to get moving and stay moving, this bike. Let's see here. I'm trying to click on the wrong screen.
Understand this is an e-bike at the end of the day, but it's just underwhelming of the power that it does not have 0 to 15. And then after 15, it gives you like 75% of the power and that thing takes off. So there's an app. It's called Kilowatt.
So there's this app. It's called Kilowatt. and I guess it's on iOS. You got to download the Test Flight app for your iPhone to be able to get the Kilowatt app, I guess. That's just a funny thing with iOS. And then on Android, I think you can just get the Kilowatt app from the App Store or the Play Store. But Kilowatt, I guess it's an app that uses Bluetooth to communicate with ASI back controllers. And it's kind of like a reverse engineered thing, I think, because ASI back controllers, usually you have to like work directly with ASI and pay for an evaluation kit, and do all and like pay ASI crazy money for a controller. Shouldn't cost that much, right? Like it's very expensive working with ASI to program one of their controllers. And that's the only way that ASI gives you access to their programming software for the controller. And I think it's subscription based. Like you buy the controller and then they let you use the software for a year or something. And I think they might even try and make you pay for a subscription to the software after that. So I've never bought an ASI controller. I don't really. They're very powerful, right? They're very refined. They're very like battle proven and tested, right? Very stable, but they're just very expensive. And I'm not a big fan of ASI controllers because they have limitations on them and like access codes and like permissions and this different stuff. And they lock you out of certain things. Like they won't let you increase the field weakening past past 20% or something. Like there's all these little like limitations in the ASI controllers. And then they have like access codes and like unlock codes, and like you're not allowed to just like do whatever you want in ASI controllers, is what I'm trying to say. So they're a little bit locked down, very expensive, but you can use this Kilowatt app to program them. I just went into the weeds there talking about ASI controllers. All right, so he's going to use the Kilowatt app to program his ASI back 2000 controller on the Lyric Graffiti X. And he changes something here. I'm not exactly sure what he changes. Let's take a
You
peek.
come into here, go into it, and right now I have my thing modified.
All right, so it says it's already set to 200 amps phase current, which is the max for this controller.
Already, but I want to load the stock map for you, and I want to show you guys how the bike takes off from factory settings. You can basically change everything you really want to, but be careful. I wouldn't go in here and change things that you don't understand. The first thing that you're really going to do is original backup. Definitely make sure you...
This backdoor software actually looks better than the software that both the version of backdoor that I have and Grintech Phase Runner Suite. Like, how does some random guy working on a open source app, Kilowatt, how does he make Kilowatt better than ASI and Grintech software for programming your controller? Like, I could never program my Phase Runner with my phone. What is going on, Grintech?
You do your original backup on here, because if you mess anything up, then you're screwed. You know what I'm saying?
So I guess you can use the Kilowatt app to back up the configuration, right? So like when you get the bike, if you're going to do this and try configuring the controller, you want to back up that factory configuration first.
So anyway, we're going to come into, I don't think it's...
So I want to pause a little bit, like see, look at these screens. What is going on? Phone, leave me alone. Who is this? Fucking robot. Okay, the robots are calling me. They're on to me. Alright, what was I doing? Lyric Graffiti X.
Throttle, is it? No, it is drivetrain. We're going to come down here, maximum torque curve.
Okay, so it's got like this torque curve thing where you can edit the torque curve. So it's torque per speed, it seems like. So there's different set points. It looks like there's like 5 set points. So at 10% speed, you can set it to use 45% power. But so it seems like it's already using a lot of power, right? So it says at the lowest setting, 10%, 45% power is 3,240 watt. But man, I mean, it seems like if you're using 3,000 watts, the bike should be able to get moving like a little bit faster. You know what I mean? So what is 8 kilometers an hour? Isn't that just like 4 miles an hour or something? Really slow? So what Mr. Central Driver does is he increases the power limit for each of these speed levels.
Now, right now, I have mine at 45%, 52%, 60%, 75%, and then 100, 100, 100, 100.
So I imagine what I'm thinking is Lyric, like they've probably configured the controller in such a way where it's matched up to the motor and the battery, right? So let's finish watching this a little bit, and then we'll talk about this a little bit more. So what he came in here and did is he's just going to increase these, right? He's trying to change the controller settings to make it go a little bit faster. And I think he did. I think he did get it moving like slightly faster. I don't think he increased the phase amps at all. Like I think the phase amps were already maxed out. And so what he's trying to do here is just make it use more watts, more power when he's going slower. Right? And I think he found some success and it went slightly faster. Let's see.
And this is all at, so 10%, this is at 8 kilometers per hour. This one's at 16 kilometers per hour. Basically just keeps telling you.
When does he start riding?
Again, stock power. And there we go. Once it hits 15, man, we're gone. But man, that 0 to 15 is really sluggish, especially when you're in the road with traffic.
It would be cool. I wish he would have hit record in the Kilowatt app here on the dyno, so we could see some stats there. This is a cool app.
And I noticed. So what we're going to do, we're going to come in here and I'm going to show you guys what I do. And we come all the way down.
So, okay, so it seems like it looks like the motor or the controller starts reducing motor power at 80C, and it cuts off power at 100C. That's pretty interesting. Motor can't get very hot. I let my Bafang hub motor get hotter than that. I thought those direct drive hub motors can get really hot. Maybe not. I don't know.
On to custom.
So this is the part where he changes the settings. Let's see what he does.
Mapping. Keep in mind, this is going to void your warranty. And it's cool because it shows the map right here so you know like how your power curve is coming on. So a lot of people were doing like 30 here, and then they were doing 40 here. I'm going to go to 45. I'm going to be brave. And we're just going to turn this
so
here.
What was it by default?
And then they were doing 40 here. I'm going to go.
Oh, interesting. So it looks like on the factory settings for this thing, it's set to use 20% power when it's first starting out, which is 1440 watts. So, I mean, I guess that could probably be why it's starting out a little bit slow. It's only using 1400 watts when you're first hitting the throttle. So it seems like he boosted it up so that instead of using about 1400 watts, he made it use like 3200 watts. So he almost made it use twice as much power from a stop.
Well, a lot of people were doing like 30 here, and then they were doing 40 here. I'm going to go to 45. I'm going to be brave. And we're just going to turn this and so that's going to be my power curve. I really want a lot of this power. I could probably technically do 100% right here on the first one, but I'm not going to just because I don't know what our voltage sag is going to be. So the battery cells that's in this battery aren't the best, and I think that's why we have so much voltage sag. I'm starting out at a full battery charge, but keep in mind, when you go down on this battery and you change these, you get the most.
So the thing is like when the motor is not moving and the speed is extremely low, when you give it a whole lot of current, like it's just all basically being wasted as heat until that thing starts spinning and moving. So like if you guys have ever used a space heater and you turn it on high, just normal space heater, you plug into the wall, you turn it on high, that's like 1500 watts, the heat coming out of a space heater. So imagine one space heater, 1500 watts. So with this bike, the battery can potentially do 7,000 watts, right? So you want to be kind of careful, right? Because if, like, imagine 7,000 watts, that's like, what is that, like 5 space heaters? So imagine 5 space heaters all, like, aiming at your hand and turned on to high. Like, that's 7,000 watts of heat going onto your hand. Like, so imagine how fast that can heat up your hand, right? So you don't want to give the motor, like, too much power, too many watts when it's not moving at all, or it just like goes into heat very quickly. So that's why manufacturers will limit the power of a direct drive hub motor when it's starting out and it's not going very fast.
Voltage draw.
And so he changed these settings. He made it use like 3200 watts instead of 1400 watts when it's starting out. I don't think he ever like recorded the dyno or checked any stats or looked at the motor temperatures or tested anything. I'm hoping he does some further testing with his Kilowatt app because I never used that. I'm not sure if the Kilowatt app works with Grintech Phase Runner. I'd be interested to try it out and see. Maybe I'll have to pull out one of my motors and try out the Kilowatt app. I got kind of sick of ASI controllers. I like Vesk. But anyways, so let's find the spot where he demonstrates this.
From your takeoff, not when you're at your draw at speed. So your battery is probably going to shut down earlier and you're going to have more of a voltage draw and you're not going to get as much range. You're going to have to turn down the power sooner or later on your ride, if that makes sense. All right, so we're going to exit out of that. Another thing I like to do is field weakening.
I wouldn't turn on field weakening at all for this direct drive hub motor. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, it's because this is already a fast wind motor that wants to go fast, right? And like the whole challenge of this thing is just giving it enough, you got to give it enough throttle and have enough room and space to get moving for it to get going fast, right? Like that's the challenge. So you're not really like being limited by the speed of the motor, right? Like the motor wants to go fast, right? Like that's what it's made to do. It's got those fast windings. So you don't really need field weakening because your top speed is already very fast, right? And if you increase the field weakening too much, it could potentially actually lower your top speed because when you increase the field weakening, it increases the top speed, but it also lowers the torque when you're going at that top speed. And so if you increase the field weakening too much, you're going to lose some torque, and then you don't actually have the torque to get going a faster speed. So like at some point, the field weakening, you can increase it, and it might go slightly faster, and it's going to be generating a lot more heat. But you might not even be able to, like if you do too much field weakening, you're going to get to a point where like you just don't have any torque to go any faster, right? And with a direct drive hub motor like this with a fast wind, I don't think you need any field weakening. I would just leave that off, right? Because the motor, in this case, the motor is going to be getting hot because you're giving it so much current just trying to get started from a stop and accelerating. So the thing that's going to be making this bike hot, this motor hot, is the acceleration and when you're going slower and stuff. Right, but then once you get going, I think this thing, like once this thing is moving, it should be running pretty efficiently. or it's not getting super hot. So where's the part where he demonstrates this? It's hard to even tell, guys. Like on the video, you can tell it's going slightly faster, but it like I still think that like a Bafang hub motor on 30 amps would get up to 30 faster than this thing.
We can use our top speed. So let's go up to 20 and let's put that app store on an iPhone. You can probably test flight. So you need an app from there, download it, and then I was going to go in the dyno and show you guys, but it doesn't show anything. But here we go. We're in mode 5, full throttle with our new tune. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. I don't know if you guys noticed a difference or not, but it definitely
seems a little
felt like it took off a lot better. Now, 100 times better? Not really.
So he's using, remember the beginning, the factory settings, about 1400 watts accelerating from stop. He changed it to about 3200 watts. It seemed like it was going faster, but I don't know that it was going twice. Like, I don't think it was accelerating twice as fast. So I think even by making this change, like, you're going to be making it slightly less efficient, probably. I would say on this bike, just like, when you're first starting out, just, I don't know, just pedal. Right? I mean, it's a moped bike. It might not be comfortable to pedal. But on this bike, it might help a lot to pedal from a lower speed, you know? It probably will. So this is a bike where you probably are going to want to pedal from a stop and put some muscle into it till it gets moving. I'll talk about another idea that I've got that could make this thing really pop off from a stop. All right?
Still has a
So I think he does a comparison at some point.
Slight slow start from 0 to 5, but it definitely felt like it picked up. We're going to do this one more time. Wait for that to go to 0. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, definitely don't feel that bad when I'm going to be in traffic. But again, 58 volts is what I'm...
It still feels slow to me. I'm pretty sure Bafang hub motor, like up to like 30 miles an hour, just blow it away. But then this thing would just like slingshot past it, and once it caught up. So let's see here. It'd be interesting to see this thing against like a dual motor hub bike. So let's see here. Alright, so here's the part where Mr. Central Driver shows a side-by-side comparison of the factory tune with the tune that he did, where he increased the power from a stop. Leave this music out so I don't get some copyright strike on some nonsense. So there it is. I don't know that he started at the same point, so it's kind of hard to, I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell, but it does seem like on the right it's going a little bit faster. I don't know. Let's try this again. Does he start from... Okay, so here's 0. Alright, so we're accelerating. So I'm just looking at the speedo. So it looks like it's maybe accelerating slightly faster. Up to about 20, maybe. Let's see. Keep pausing it and looking at the speeds here. 12 and 18. So then once he got going like 20 something, it seems like it really starts taking off. Alright, so it's hard to even tell. Like, it's hard to even tell. When you slow down the video, I mean, it was accelerating faster after he changed the settings, but like you had to literally slow down the video quite a bit to be able to even notice a difference. So let's talk about this, guys. So what are the options here? What should we do with this Lyric Graffiti X? So I still think the motor itself is just a fast winding, and like that's just gonna be kind of like part of its characteristics, right? Is it's just gonna accelerate from a stop a little bit slower. And yeah, that just might be kind of how it is, guys. That just might be in its nature. It's kind of like Bowser in Mario Kart. It's just going to start out a little bit slower, but then once it gets moving, it's moving, buddy. Right? So then, but what else? So we can go the Mr. Central Driver route and try and tweak the controller settings to make it accelerate faster and make it change the performance a little bit with the controller settings. But the thing about that is that usually when you build an e-bike, the manufacturer of the e-bike is going to configure the controller in such a way where it's matched with the battery and the motor, right? So like the manufacturer of an e-bike should really like set up the controller with the best settings that are suitable for the motor and the battery, right? So why is this bike configured this way? Like, why did Lyric make this choice? So they made a few choices, right? The first one is they made the choice that they wanted the fast wind motor, right? And that was the main choice that they made, right? That caused this slow acceleration. It's this Lyric, they made the conscious decision that they want this thing is designed to be moving fast, right? So they chose a motor that is suited for that task, right? I think it would be cool if Lyric offered a different option, like a torque version of the bike and like a speed version of the bike or something. Because I think that a lot of people would probably prefer a torquier version of the bike that's maybe like, a little bit less top speed, but gets up to top speed faster, like maybe like 40. It seems like you should be able to make a direct drive hub motor bike kind of like the goat power bikes, where it should be able to have like a torquey direct drive motor that can get going a solid like 40 miles an hour pretty good. I kind of like how they have those bikes set up, the goat power bikes. Like in your head it might seem cool to get a fast wind hub motor with a high top speed, but the thing about that is like you got to really think about like how what's your riding style and like your riding environment. And like do you do a lot of like stopping and going, right? A lot of like stop and go traffic like in cities and stuff. Like this might not this is going to be like Bowser, right? Like I don't know. It'd be cool if they had a torquier version of this as an option, right? I think that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, this thing is just made to go fast. It's just in its nature. We can change controller settings a little bit, but the thing about this bike is that I think that the weakest link on this bike is probably the battery. So let's talk about the battery on the Lyric Graffiti X a little bit. So if we go down here, it says it's a 60 volt, 40 amp hour battery. And then if you keep going down somewhere else, it says what kind of battery cells are in it. So right here, it says Samsung 50E cells, right? So it's 40 amp hours of Samsung 50E cells. So the Samsung 50E, I think that's a 5,000 milliamp hour cell, right? So to make that 40 amp hours, I think the battery is an 8 parallel, right? So I think that the battery, they've got 8 cells in parallel, and then they've got 16 cells in series for that 16S 8P battery. And so with Samsung 50E cells, we should be able to figure out like what can we do with this battery and what settings can we push the controller to max the battery out. Right, so we got that 60 volt 40 amp hour battery, 16S 8P Samsung 50E cells. So the 50Es, they're 9.8 amps continuous discharge, and then they're about 15 amps peak discharge, right? And so I think that this is probably the Samsung 50E cells in this battery are probably like the limiting factor of this bike, right? Because when you've got them in 8P, that means you can do about 80 amps continuous out of this bike, which is about 4,700 watts. And then you can do about 117 amps peak, which is over 7,000 watts. Right? And so if we look on the Lyric website under the specs for the controller, it doesn't say it's an ASI back 2000, but it does say the amperage. Right? It says right here, it says motor peak watts. It says 3,000 watts, 7,200 watts peak. Right? So that's how they have this battery configured on this thing, is 7,200 watts peak. So, I mean, it seems like Lyric probably has the controller set to do the maximum that the battery cells are capable of doing, right? And so I think the battery is the weakest link on this thing. In terms of voltage drop, so if you have a fully charged battery, fully charged Graffiti X battery, and you're doing a 117 amp discharge, like the peak discharge, the voltage could potentially drop, from the 67 volts full charge down to like, 55 to 60 volts. So that's the thing about the bike and this battery, is it's got those Samsung 50E cells in it. Each cell can only do like 10 amps continuous. So an 8 parallel, it kind of limits the current. And it's a good match, right? Like, it's a good match between the battery and the motor. Like, even if you got a better battery, then the question would be, well, how much more can the motor handle, right? And I imagine Lyric probably did some testing with that. And even if you get a better battery, you might not be able to push the motor much further, right? So I think that battery with the 16S8P Samsung 50E cells in it, that's probably the limiting factor. But like, yeah, so if you got a different battery, you could maybe configure that ASI back 2000 controller to do a little bit more current. Like, instead of 117 amps, you could maybe go up to like the maximum current of the ASI back 2000, which is apparently 185 amps max estimated battery current, is what the ASI back 2000 says on their website. So potentially you could get a better battery on this thing, and then bump that controller up, bump up the battery amps, and do more battery amps with like some higher discharge cells if you had a better battery. But it's already configured for the 2000 amps phase, and that's the maximum that the controller can do. So you wouldn't be able to bump up the phase amps at all. The only thing you could really do with a better battery is just bump up the battery amps. And that doesn't... It would allow you to do more watts at a slower speed, but I don't even know if it's worth it, right? Like, I don't know if it's worth doing... I don't know if it's worth doing more than like, thousands of watts when the bike is barely moving, because it's just going to generate so much heat. So that's probably why Lyric has the Graffiti controller configured in this way, right? I think it's just a fast wind motor, guys. Like, I think it was just a design choice. right? I think that Lyric, they probably know what they're doing. They probably know how to configure that controller to match up with the battery specs, and it seems like the specs on the website, line up with the battery specs, and that's probably how they have the controller configured, right? They say it's the controller. They say 80 amp controller, right? Well, that's about 80 amps is about what the battery can do continuously, right? And then they say 7200 watts peak in unlimited mode, and that's about what the peak of the battery can discharge, right? The peak battery discharge. So I don't know that trying to configure the controller is gonna have a whole lot of effect on this bike, because it seems like Lyric already programmed it and kind of matched it up with the battery. So it seems like Mr. Central Driver, he did get it accelerating a little bit faster, by changing the watts from 1400 to 3000 from a stop. But I'd be interested to know, I'd be interested to see him run the dyno, record a dyno run with both of those tunes, and then see what the heat looks like, and if the motor's getting hotter after he changed that tune. And then the other thing that I was looking at, that I think that, so this guys, this is my opinion on how you could make your Lyric Graffiti X accelerate faster from a stop. I came up with this idea last night. So what I would say is, if you want to make this thing accelerate faster from a stop, this bike, the front wheel, where is it? Where's the wheels? Where are the wheels on this thing? Anyways, the front wheel on this thing, it's a fat bike dropout spacing. 135 millimeter fat bike front wheel on this thing. So, in theory, now I don't know, right? I'm not sure. But since it has a 135 millimeter front fork on this thing, and I don't know if it's a through axle or what. If this bike has a through axle fork on the front of it, this idea might not work, right? You might have to get a different fork or something. But you could put a front motor on this thing, like a geared hub motor. So imagine if you had a Graffiti X and it had a geared hub motor on the front, right? Because they're 135 millimeter spacing. So, I mean, in theory, you could get a fork, a fat bike fork, for the front of this thing, get a wheel with a geared hub motor in it, like a 1000 watt Bafang G61 front hub motor. Get a 1000 watt geared hub motor in the front of this thing, dual motors. Man, I bet it would take off then. That's an idea. It'd be pretty heavy. And you probably need a different battery for the front motor, or else you would have to limit the rear motor in such a way where the front motor and the rear motor could pull from that same battery. But I don't know, it'd be interesting to see a front geared hub motor on a Lyric Graffiti X and see how much that helps it accelerate. Because I've done some dual motors in the past. I've done a mid-drive with a hub motor, and I've done dual hub motors and stuff. And it would be interesting to see that really high-speed direct drive motor in the back with a front hub motor that could kind of help it get going a little bit. That'd be interesting to see. Alright guys, well that's kind of my take on this Lyric Graffiti X slow acceleration situation. I think it's just by design. I think that Lyric made the conscious decision to put a fast wind motor in this thing, and just by nature, its characteristics just mean that it's just going to start out and accelerate a little bit slower. It's not going to have as much torque for getting up hills and stuff. This bike is like Bowser in Mario Kart. It's going to take a while to get moving, but then once it does, it's going to be moving, buddy, and it's going to want to stay moving. So this bike currently with this motor, it's not made for stop and go. This thing just wants to keep on going, right? So it's a cool bike. I just wanted to make a video about this to kind of explain. Like, some people are kind of confused. Like, well, I paid $4,600 and my Lyric Graffiti X isn't, it feels slow. Like, it's not accelerating fast. It can't get up a hill in San Francisco. Well, here's why, guys. Is because it's got a fast wind motor. It's made to go fast. It's not very torquey. Yeah. So, depending on how you ride your e-bike, that could be a disadvantage. If you ride in a lot of stop and go traffic, you might have cars honking at you and you might be getting in the way. But let me know, do you have a Lyric Graffiti X? What do you think about it? How's it going for you? Some people seem like they're pleased with it and they don't mind the slow starting out. And then some people are kind of just like, well, what the heck? I paid $4,600 and this thing feels slow and it's starting out slow and cars are honking at me and right? So that's why, guys. It's a high-speed motor. That's just what it is. It's kind of like Bowser. You might be able to tweak that controller a little bit. Like, you can maybe put a better battery on it with higher discharge cells. But then the question is like, how many more amps could you get that controller pulling, right? And then so that it's potential, the controller could potentially start to heat up. I think the ASI back 2000, I think that controller, it starts thermal throttling at 80C and then it stops at 100C. So you can maybe have the controller do more battery amps, but then the controller might be getting hot, the motor might be getting hot. You would need a whole new battery that's better, you know. So I think with this bike, it just kind of is what it is. You might be able to do the Mr. Central Driver tune on this thing to get it starting out a little bit faster. But I hope that he does some testing and kind of checks on what the side effects of that are, because something's probably getting hotter somewhere when you increase the watts when you double the watts. So yeah, let me know, guys. Let me know in the comments. Do you have this bike? What do you think about this bike? Would this bike work for you, or do you need more of an e-bike where it can accelerate quicker and get out of the way and get moving faster? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year coming up. Peace out, dudes.